Hi.
Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome to Hell Money Podcast. I'm Erin.
And I am Casey.
And I guess this is episode 1.
Episode 1, that's right.
We are Bitcoin enthusiasts.
Big Bitcoin fans, Bitcoin enjoyers, as the Zoomers say.
Exactly. We've decided to start a podcast that will probably be mostly about Bitcoin. We might talk about other things. Who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, but we're both multifaceted, varied individuals with a wide range of interests outside of Bitcoin.
Yes.
I mean, that's Erin. I'm not. I just am interested in Bitcoin. That's it.
Yeah, you're just obsessed with Bitcoin. I'm obsessed with Bitcoin and also obsessed with many other things. But I guess for episode 1, we decided it was good to start at the beginning. The Bitcoin Whitepaper.
The PDF that changed everything.
That's our hook.
You won't believe.
That's going to get us the views. That's the clickbait. We're starting with the Whitepaper. We're going to talk about kind of the political, societal context in which it arose, as well as like the technical context.
Yep, just go over the technical stuff a little bit. Not like, don't need to be afraid, we're going to go at it at a high level, give you some touch points for you to start your own Bitcoin education or continue your own.
Yeah, so you can
Bitcoin
orange
education.
pill your friends and orange pill yourself.
Yep.
I think to start, we'll kind of like discuss the context, kind of lure you in with like why it's important, why we care about it. And then once you're hooked, then Casey can bore with the technical stuff.
That's right.
But I don't think it'll be
bloviate at great length.
Yeah, exactly.
But before that, who are we?
Who are we? Good question.
Yeah.
I'm a multifaceted individual. I'm a planetary scientist, astronomer / astrologer / doomsday prepper.
This is what I like about Erin, is that she's really into like astrology and like doomsday prepping and like vibes. And then she's also like a legitimate scientist, like PhD student.
I think it's valuable.
PhD student where?
At Berkeley.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Not no podunk.
No, University of the best public school in the world.
That's right.
And we're Bay Area based. We're both Bay Area. We met through Bay Area Bitcoin meetups. I just kind of became obsessed with Bitcoin at some point along my journey. I would say it was a combination of many sort of converging factors, but I sort of started from like a doomsday prepper perspective on it. Like I saw Bitcoin as like, I didn't know that much about it, but I knew it was one of those things that people would like buy, like they buy gold, kind of.
Yeah, and like what is going to rescue us from the chaotic decadence of...
Yes, the now.
The now.
Exactly.
Of current year.
Yeah, exactly. So I started kind of just buying Bitcoin, not really knowing much about it, and then at some point got into it. I'm sure we'll talk more at length about like our individual kind of stories into Bitcoin. But yeah, at some point, it kind of just clicked for me, the power that it has to transform the world in a way that I think would be good for the world. Then just, I don't know, at some point I decided that a Bitcoin podcast was a reasonable next destination.
We actually both kind of decided that we wanted to do a Bitcoin podcast before we... Separately. Yeah. And now we found each other that we can now do a Bitcoin podcast together. Yeah, that's right. That's right. We will read the horoscope of the Bitcoin Whitepaper.
Obviously.
Not on this episode, but on a future episode.
Yeah. What about you, Casey?
Yeah, so I am a programmer. I also went to Berkeley, and I've worked for a bunch of giant evil tech companies like Facebook and Google. I guess I worked at Oculus, not Facebook, but it was basically part of Facebook at the time.
Now that Facebook's Meta, it's basically
bigger than Facebook. I fucking hate that. I'm never going to say Meta. They will never make me say their words.
Anyway.
Yeah, right. And then 2013, I was working at Google. I got super obsessed with Bitcoin, read the white paper, just really dove into it, and I was like, I think that this is going to work. And since then, I've been like all in on Bitcoin. I worked on Bitcoin Core briefly. I worked at Chaincode Labs, which is this weird like R&D outfit that does open source Bitcoin development. So I worked on Bitcoin Core. You can go on github.com/Bitcoin/Bitcoin and see the commits that I made, all these like tiny little cleanup commits. And then aside from that, I've been working on other Bitcoin related projects, always been into P2P file sharing, trying to enable that with Bitcoin, and also other strange and magical things.
Strange and degenerate activities.
That's
yes.
right. Yeah.
Word. Yeah, so I guess that's us. I'm
Yep.
sure you'll hear about us more because we both love to talk, and I'm sure we'll talk about ourselves.
Yes. Yeah.
Then maybe we should get into
Let's get into the white paper.
The lady of the hour, the Bitcoin white paper, Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system by Satoshi Nakamoto.
Yep.
Where to start? I guess, Casey, it might be helpful for you to give kind of like a more technical context, like what sort of led up to Bitcoin.
Yeah,
white paper,
totally.
And
Yeah, so there was this mailing list. I don't know if it's still around. It sort of started having spam problems, which led to its demise, called the Cypherpunk mailing list. And it was a mailing list for people on the internet who cared a great deal about privacy and about, freedom, allowing people to coordinate in a decentralized, voluntary way. So yeah, it was a forum for people like that to discuss technical innovations like cryptography and systems like Bitcoin. So this was a anonymous mailing list that you could post to without people knowing your identity. And there had been a number of, systems proposed over the years on the mailing list for electronic cash systems of various kinds. A lot of them were very much like incomplete sketches. They had problems which, the authors would acknowledge, like, hey, here's a system, it has these issues, but, it's a contribution to like our
the kind of open source sort of, yeah.
Yep. And so lots of, famous people contributed to that list, people who went on to like, do things with the EFF, Bram Cohen, the inventor of BitTorrent, and obviously our boy, Satoshi Nakamoto, who, in late 2008, right? Yeah, late
Halloween 2008.
Yeah, spoopy. Dropped this PDF, which is a description of Bitcoin and a new peer-to-peer system of digital money.
And so he sent this initially to the like listserv, email list, whatever, just kind of being like, hey guys, I think I solved this problem that we've been, whatever. And that was sort of it for a while. And then the first block of Bitcoin wasn't until January 2009.
Yeah, there's something in between then. He then released the software. So it was like white paper, and then he released the Bitcoin software so that everybody could like try it out. And I think he also released the source code at the same time. And then sometime later, you said, when was the Genesis block mined?
January 3rd, 2009.
January 3rd, 2009. So yeah, and then at that point, he released the Genesis block. And that was the start of the network that has been in continuous operation since then.
Right.
The Bitcoin network.
So the white paper essentially describes like the invention or whatever.
It's very much an academic paper. It describes, the systems that kind of came before it and, builds up the solution step by step that Bitcoin solves, which is like, how do you have a decentralized digital money and avoid needing some trusted central authority upon which every previous digital money system had relied.
I always think it's funny that people tell you to start with the white paper, like when you're getting into Bitcoin, because just reading this, I'm like, this is so technical. You know what I mean? It is like what you said about it being like an academic paper. It's exactly right. Like it's written like an academic paper, and it's not. Yeah, it's simple, which is great. And I think partially maybe that's why people say to start with it, because it is just kind of the base explanation. Like this is Bitcoin and this is the sort of innovation technically that it is. But I feel like the timing that this kind of came about in terms of like societal and political context is really like the story here, at least for me.
Let me say just something really quick about starting with the Bitcoin white paper. I agree. Like a lot of the time I tell people to start with the white paper and it's like, well, like it's hard to understand. There's a lot of weird stuff in here.
Maybe programmers.
Yeah, programmers definitely start with the white paper. But I actually think normies should also start with the white paper and just like skim it. Just have the goal of like reading the words and like just there's some stuff you will understand because it's in plain English. There's some stuff that you won't because it's tech speak, but they're all things that, and then then have it as a goal, which you'll just do naturally by reading blog posts and listening to podcasts, etc., of like filling in those gaps of your knowledge, because it's like it's all here,
right?
The details of the system are all here. But political and social context. What was happening in current year when Bitcoin the white paper was dropped?
I mean, it's very obvious based on Satoshi's other messages, like outside of the white paper, that Satoshi had sort of a political context in which this was, I mean, as you said, like kind of the cypherpunk, like concerns about like privacy, that sort of thing. I think like that group was thinking about the internet in like a cautious forward thinking way where they were like also realizing that with the internet progressing also meant like that our data was going to be much more available and our privacy was going to, privacy was going to be an issue basically. And I think they were also thinking about the way that can then be used to like control a population as well. Like just thinking about like big forces and how do you take the power away from these big centralized forces that are going to emerge when you have like all this data freely available, which I mean is basically what we've seen happen. Right? Like it was like a forward thinking caution about the reality that we're in now.
And that's very much like the vibe of the cypherpunks mailing list of people who are technologists, but who see the incredible level of control and censorship and like panopticon that you can build with the internet, right? Both the potential and the danger of these technologies.
Obviously, this focuses a lot on privacy, right? Which privacy, I know a lot of Bitcoin people obviously care a lot about privacy. I'm sure I would not want to not have privacy, but it's not something that I struggle to like wrap my mind around it conceptually.
Oh,
honestly.
Yeah.
The thing that I feel like brought me to Bitcoin and is kind of like the main narrative around Bitcoin that I was surprised to like not really hear anything about in the white paper is like the critique of the current monetary system. Like the critique of fiat, basically.
Right, yeah. I mean, the interesting thing is that it talks about avoiding a trusted central party, but it doesn't talk about why you would want to avoid a trusted central party. Like, what are the systems today that rely on trusted central parties that have problems because of that reliance on a trusted third party?
Right. And I think it's not really until like the Genesis block, the first block of Bitcoin, that that is sort of, I mean, I guess Satoshi is sending messages, whatever, but kind of written into like the origin story of Bitcoin with that first message on the Genesis block is like more of a commentary, I think, on the monetary system and why we need a new system. That message was, quote, "The Times, January 3rd, 2009, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks." And that was just the headline of The Times, which is a UK newspaper. Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks obviously provides a lot of like political historical context for what the current monetary situation was.
And it actually had a second purpose, which was to prove that he hadn't created the Genesis block like a long time ago and withheld it and then mined a bunch of blocks in secret on top of it. So it proved that everybody had the same fair start. Right. So what happened in 2008, 2009 to the current monetary system?
Yeah, who knows, right? I mean, it's really crazy to me that like of the kind of 2008 financial crisis where it just became so abundantly clear to everyone that like the government, whoever is in power, cannot be trusted with our money, whether that's like the government, corporations, whatever, that they will screw over the little man and bail themselves out essentially every time. That out of that time came, Bitcoin, right? That was late 2008 into 2009 with this kind of context of a trustless system where you don't have to trust that higher up centralized authority. And also, Barack Obama inauguration was that exact same month. I think it was like January 3rd, Bitcoin, January 20th.
Of that same month.
Was Barack Obama's inauguration. And I just think that's like very poetic. Honestly, probably should look at the astrology of that one. But I think that's like, it's both of those solutions. They were basically proposed solutions to the situation,
and two totally different solutions, right? Barack Obama was running on this platform of like, oh, we can fix this, a platform of hope. Like if we just try really hard, like kind of put our heads together and like we can work through all these problems, right? And Bitcoin was completely different. Like, here's an alternative to the current system. We don't necessarily need to reform or fix the current system. This is a way that you can opt out of the current system into a new system.
And into a system that is trustless, which I think is a key word that I struggled to understand in the beginning. And I think a lot of people can't even wrap their heads around because that's just so out of the norm of anything, right? So I don't know, can you speak to what is like trustless and why is trustless important?
Sure, yeah. I mean, so one word that I think is like really useful to keep in mind is that other systems other than Bitcoin, the fiat monetary system, fiat banking, credit cards, etc., these are systems which are discretionary. The way that the system behaves depends on the discretion of certain people who are running the system. Whether or not your credit card transaction goes through depends on the discretion of the credit card company, right? They decide that it's fraud or not. They have some rules, right? But the way that those rules are interpreted and enforced is up to the discretion of human beings. Fiat monetary systems are discretionary systems. How much money gets printed, when it gets printed, who prints it is up to the discretion of of people, of people in power. However, Bitcoin is not a discretionary system. Bitcoin has rules that are more or less fixed and extremely hard to change. Some of those rules are probably impossible to change, and it just operates deterministically based on those rules. If you know those rules, you know how the system will operate. You know that your transaction will go through. You know that the person you want to pay will get paid. You know how much Bitcoin will be created at what time. And so I think that's just another way of saying trustless. A system with trust is a system that has functionaries in that system who you trust to interpret and execute the rules of that system.
Right. And I think that's basically politics as it's existed so far. And I think it is honestly very well exemplified, I think, by Barack Obama's presidency and the movement behind him, because there was, in many ways, he was like the perfect candidate to come in at the perfect time, right? Where the entire system collapsed. There was an opportunity to completely change the system, and everybody was kind of behind that, right? And the momentum was there. He had Congress, he had the Senate, he got coming in, and then nothing happened.
Yeah, I mean, it shows you how sort of weak political solutions are.
Exactly. I don't even think it's I think people are tempted to put it on him as an individual, and I don't think it is. I think it's the system itself that it's impossible to change.
Right.
And
we looked at all of the predecessors to Barack Obama and we're like, oh, they did terribly. They put us in this mess. They created this terrible system. And then we had a lot of hope for Barack Obama, but he slotted into exactly the same system with exactly the same constraints as his predecessors.
Right. Exactly. And that's just the nature of the beast. Right. And I think these two things coming out of January 2009, Barack Obama's inauguration obviously coming in as the major global event, Bitcoin invention, coming to maybe a couple random nerds on the internet, mostly unknown. It's interesting to see now, looking back, many years later, how the two have played out, where I think I've become increasingly less convinced that a political solution is possible. Yeah. And I think that sort of political movement and the failing that was the political solution, right? And this is the technical system solution.
It's interesting to think about Bitcoin as an apolitical solution, right? Bitcoin functions in a certain way, and the way that it functions is not politics, Obviously there's politics of Bitcoin and politics in how Bitcoin interacts with the world, but Bitcoin itself, the core, is an apolitical system. It's the stars. I was going to say the planets orbiting the stars. They do what they do regardless of how you feel about it.
Right, exactly. And I think obviously the implications of Bitcoin adoption, it's a political implication, of course, but I agree with you. It's when you get into the weeds of what it actually does and what it would mean, it's kind of interesting in the way that it sort of transcends our current political alignment. I think a lot of people want to associate it with libertarianism because it's just, sort of this idea of individual sovereignty or something that is kind of, and it's obvious why libertarians like Bitcoin, right? But I also think I kind of come from a more left-leaning perspective, although I don't think left and libertarian are exclusive, but whatever. And I think there's a lot to be said for a left perspective on Bitcoin. Yeah. There's a lot to be said on a personal liberty perspective. There's kind of all these different tendrils that I think it encompasses in a way that I think we have not been able to conceptualize different political opinions or values coming together.
Right.
And ultimately, I think that's what we need in I think we need 21st century politics for a 21st century world. I feel the kind of model that we've been using so far has been this war between communism, capitalism, whatever, that doesn't seem like it really works or fits or applies anymore. Yeah. And I feel for me, that was a big aha moment with Bitcoin was oh my God, this is a new way forward that actually seems fit for the world that we live in.
Yeah, Bitcoin is something that's going to appeal to libertarians just right off the bat.
Right.
You know what I mean? But I think it should appeal to people on the left a great deal as well.
Yeah.
If you look at the history of, left-wing political movements, a lot of the time they've been concerned with resisting or opposing tyrannical, fascist, centralized systems of command and control, and similarly also, in like in the Russian Revolution, you had sort of more like anarchist leaning left wing revolutionaries sort of struggling against the more centralized, tyrannical, Bolsheviks, right? And so in that way, Bitcoin is a system that can absolutely slot into a left-wing worldview.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin is for the people, ultimately. Yeah. And I feel like this is kind of a common misconception with people that don't know anything about Bitcoin is like, Bitcoin's not a company. Like, Satoshi Nakamoto is not the CEO of Bitcoin, right? Like,
people ask, like, oh, is Satoshi Nakamoto, like, the CEO of, like, Bitcoin Inc.?
Right.
And it's like, no, there is no
There is no company. Yeah. There's no board of executives that decide what the rules are of Bitcoin. Like, it doesn't work like that. And again, I think it's one of these things where, like, people cannot even conceptualize because they're so not used to that style of like governance, I guess.
And it's so weird. Like I mean, this is just not going to make any sense at all. But Bitcoin is like things that just aren't companies in our lives, and so they're hard to identify. Like Bitcoin is like going to the pub and getting a drink with your friends. Like, yeah, you go to a particular pub and get a drink with your friends, but like nobody owns like going and getting a drink with your friends at the pub. Bitcoin is like U-turns. There's no U-turn company. Everybody makes U-turns.
Yes.
Nobody owns U-turns. Bitcoin is like this thing that's hard to conceptualize because it doesn't, many things that we do, we identify them with companies, services that we use, products we buy. Bitcoin is just it's like a convention. It's a convention that everybody participates in.
Yeah, I feel like an example would be like, if you think about like various medications that have been invented by humanity, like they're not really owned by humanity. Generally, they're patented and owned by pharmaceutical companies. Yeah. And I think that's the kind of way that people are used to thinking because that's the way that our society operates.
But Bitcoin's not like that.
Bitcoin's not like that.
Bitcoin is like Christmas. Yeah. Nobody owns Christmas. Bitcoin is like Ramadan. Nobody owns Ramadan.
Right.
It's a cultural convention.
Yeah. And I think like it's the peer-to-peer aspect of it too, I think is so important, and why it is like specifically, I think Bitcoin is for the people is like it allows people to do business with each other without a middleman, without whether that be the government, credit card companies, banks, whatever. It allows for the monetary system to be decentralized and owned by people rather than by insert whatever big power you're concerned about, whether it's government or corporation.
And you can still have a government with Bitcoin, right? Like, I mean, it's not exclusive of a government existing. It just means that government needs to be a bit more, restrained. Like it doesn't have arbitrary power over how people interact with each other.
I think it's a little bit more in line with like, the kind of anarchist idea of how, like, I think a lot of people think of anarchy as being like every man for himself, but I think there's a more like reasonable definition of anarchy that's like groups coming together for mutual interest, right? Rather than like one group exploiting the other and kind of like creating like a slavery exploitation situation, that it would be more like mutually beneficial collaboration. And I think that is what Bitcoin allows for, is a more mutually beneficial government rather than a government that has power because it, inflates the currency and removes the wealth from the majority of its people, for example. Yeah, also interesting that, like, I feel like inflation is such a big topic. Obviously, like, inflation's a big topic because inflation's a big problem, like, whether you're thinking about Bitcoin or not. A lot of people are thinking about inflation. But it's interesting that that's not even talked about in the white paper at all.
No, this is a pure academic, technical paper that doesn't get into that at all.
Yeah.
But if you look at Satoshi's other writings and like on the email list and on the forum, like there's Bitcoin Talk forum, which has been around since probably a year or two after Bitcoin was invented, has posts from Satoshi. So you can go read what he said. And,
I love that.
Yeah. And a lot of what he said is like, oh yeah, this will get us like a territory of freedom for a few years that maybe we can defend. So there is a lot of political stuff in Satoshi's body of work that's out there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think like the inflation part is such a big key thing with, I mean, especially I think when you're thinking about, the bailout of the banks, fiat currency, like from that perspective of like what the power of government, how government uses its power to control the monetary system, which is literally never for the people. It's literally always for the corporations or for parties that have, sway over the government, basically. And I think, that's probably a whole, I feel like inflation will probably be a whole episode in and of itself if we wanted it to be. But it's just interesting, all the different problems that Bitcoin solves that are not even necessarily an inherent part of the technology, if that makes sense. I guess it is in a way, but it's not like...
Yeah, like the technology is described here, but then all the implications and then everything that falls out of it isn't.
Right.
You know, like what happens when you have a currency that can't be manipulated, that can't be printed, right? It doesn't discuss that, right?
Exactly.
And in some ways, that's the most important part of, Bitcoin.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it makes sense when you think about, political power coming from economic power, that if you liberate the money, make the money so that nobody has power over it intrinsically over anyone else, all these other sort of tendrils of problems start to solve themselves. And it's beautiful. There's some quote in the end of it where he talks about the network is robust in its unstructured simplicity, right? Like it is, that's what it is, right? It's an incentive system and a network that just works because it's baked into the cake.
Yeah,
right?
And once you have like that incentive system, you don't need a bunch of hierarchy.
Yeah.
Everything just kind of falls out naturally from the incentives.
Right. Yeah, it's beautiful.
Should we start going through the paper?
Sure, let's go through it. Yeah.
All right. So the paper starts. You can read along. Just search for like Bitcoin PDF.
Bitcoin.org.
I think it's like bitcoin.org/bitcoin.pdf.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Should we just go through kind of section by section and sort of you can kind of summarize and I can ask questions?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool.
Yep. So it's a short paper. It's 9 pages long, including a page of citations, and then like 2.5 pages of some calculations, which are like really secondary. They're, incredibly important, but it's a long, like low content section. It's a really short paper. I mean, I think that's why people recommend to start with it, because it's so compact. Section 1. So section 1 is just the introduction, where they talk about how the internet has essentially come to rely entirely on centralized financial institutions, being trusted third parties that process everything. That's it. And it kind of recapitulates the abstract. And then section 2 talks about transactions. Yeah. And this is, it basically talks about how to use cryptography to perform transactions. And the basic idea is that everybody who wants to transact has a private key, which is something that they don't tell anybody. And they have a public key, which they can tell everybody, which is related to their private key. And this is called public key cryptography or asymmetric cryptography. And the basic operation of asymmetric cryptography is I can take a message, and in this case, it's going to be a transaction. Say something that says like, okay, Casey pays Erin $10. And then or 10 Bitcoin, because, this is a Bitcoin podcast.
And that was the initial payment amount. Satoshi sent 10 Bitcoin. I'm pretty sure I read that.
Oh, to Hal Finney?
Yes.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
I think
it was
that
like
was
10
the
or
initial,
100 or...
Yeah, I think it was 10.
Yeah.
So yes, 10 Bitcoin
okay, yeah,
in this example.
Yeah, 10 Bitcoin. So I take this message, which basically says, Casey pays Erin 10 Bitcoin. And then I take my private key and the message, and I produce what's called a signature. A signature is this, tiny string of information. It's just a few bytes. And then I can send that transaction and that message to somebody else. And they can take my public key, which I've broadcast widely, everybody can know that, the message and the signature, and they can say, okay, this signature was made by Casey, the person who has the private key that corresponds to this public key, over this message. And nobody else can modify the message after I've sent it, or after I've signed it, and have the signature still be valid. And basically, this just says, this transaction sections talk about exactly that, how to use asymmetric cryptography to create these transactions that you can't tamper with them. This system is sort of where the state of the art was before Bitcoin.
Sure.
Everybody has a private key. Everybody knows everybody else's public key. Everybody makes transactions by signing them and broadcasting them to everybody else. And you can verify that those transactions are valid. Now, there's a problem. Let's say I have 10 Bitcoin and I create one transaction that pays you 10 Bitcoin. And then I make another transaction that pays David 10 Bitcoin. But I only have a total of 10 Bitcoin. The order in which those transactions occur is incredibly important. If everybody sees, because they both pay a total of 20 Bitcoin, but I only have 10 Bitcoin. So if people see the transaction to you paying you 10 Bitcoin first, David won't get anything, right? Because the second check will essentially bounce. And if they see the transaction to David first, then the transaction paying you will be invalid, right?
And that's essentially what is money right now, sending money, right? The double spend problem. This is the double spend problem, right? Where I could write a check to someone, write a check to another person, and whoever cashes the check first is the one that will essentially get it.
And in the current system, we rely on a trusted central third party. Let's say I belong to, Bank of, wherever, Bank of Sansaritha.
Bank of Hell.
Bank of Hell. Yeah, I belong to the Bank of Hell. And so I write these 2 checks with which one of them is going to bounce. And the Bank of Hell just gets them in whatever order, some order, right? And the Bank of Hell decides what the canonical order is, right? We trust them, and that's going to determine which of these 2 payments bounces. So the central problem that Bitcoin is solving is how to come up with an order to transactions that everybody can agree on. So far, so good?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Sweet. Awesome. So then, third section is a timestamp server, where he talks about essentially just a, way that you could, unfortunately the details of this are kind of technical, but a simple way that you can sort of order items. And you can order items by putting them into a block, by taking a bunch of items and putting them into a block, hashing that block, which produces this tiny 32-byte number. And then each block contains the hash of the previous block. So a hash is a function, you take some data, you put it into a hash function, you get this little tiny summary, and you can't change the data that you put into the hash function without changing the data that you get out. So sort of each hash commits to the contents that it is over. So this is a way that you can sort of create this chain of blocks that kind of creates an order to those transactions. However,
but is this the blockchain?
Yeah, that's the blockchain.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the blockchain, roughly speaking. Yeah. But still, this section doesn't say, everybody could create different blockchains, right? Everybody could create different orders of events. How do we solve this? So that gets us to the next section.
And I guess is that the context that cryptography was at pre-Bitcoin, where there was, because I feel the double spend problem is one of the things that's talked about with Bitcoin as being one of the innovations. But so is this an improvement on kind of the problem?
I think that I don't know if a chain of blocks had been proposed.
Okay.
A timestamp server had been proposed, but there was no way to agree on what, to the next part.
The next part.
Yeah, you could create timestamp servers, but there was no canonical timestamp server.
Sure.
I could have a timestamp server, you could have a timestamp server.
I see.
How do we decide which sequence of events, whose timestamp server is sort of the canonical one?
Okay. And that matters why?
Because we want to solve the double spend problem, right? If we could have Bank of Erin and Bank of Casey, and we're all processing these checks, and Bank of Casey decides that check A came before check B, and Bank of Erin decides that check B came before check A, and we come up with different answers. And how do you know who to trust?
Right. Yeah. Okay. I
see. So now we introduce proof of work.
Section 4.
Yep. And basically what this says is that you collect these transactions into a block, and then you burn a bunch of electricity. You do a simple function over and over again that sort of stamps this block with proof that you did a whole bunch of work to construct this block. And then...
and I think that's basically the controversial... I feel that's the main FUD against Bitcoin, right?
Oh, yeah, the energy FUD.
And I'm sure we'll honestly do an entire episode probably.
Yeah, I think we can do an entire energy FUD
energy FUD, whatever.
Absolutely.
We'll talk about that at length.
Yeah.
But, why, I guess, in a nutshell, is proof of work important?
Yeah, so, in the systems that we've talked about before, which are trusted, systems that rely on a trusted third party to come up with a canonical ordering of events, when we remove that trusted third party, anybody can claim that the events happened in any order. It's very cheap to come up with an alternate history that says, no, the events happened in this order, right? You can come up with an alternate history. You can come up with thousands of alternate history and tell different people about different alternate histories that sort of benefit you, like by maybe showing that, 3 different alternate histories that show that these 3 different people got paid when in fact none of them got paid. And so what proof of work does is it means it's actually very expensive to create a alternate history. And because it's very expensive, there's going to be fewer of them. You can't create them at will. And everybody can kind of look for the version of history which is the most expensive. And that allows them to all converge on a single history, because everybody can see all the different histories and they can see which one was the most expensive to create. And they can go, that one is the most expensive. It has the most work, as we say. That is going to be the canonical chain, canonical ordering
The
of
longest
transactions.
chain, whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. And that's actually kind of it. I mean, once you have that, everything kind of works. You have these nodes called miners that are all constructing candidate blocks and then doing a bunch of work. And then once they do enough work on a block, broadcasting that block to the rest of the network, everybody else can see that block, which represents a certain ordering of transactions, had a certain amount of work on it. They can see that it's the most expensive. And then everybody starts building on that as the new basis for the next block.
And that's sort of, I guess, what makes it like decentralized and like publicly accessible. We're all, everyone can see this, right? Like anyone can be a node and see the Bitcoin blockchain,
That's
whatever, right? And participate in it. And that's where like the not needing a bank, not needing a government currency, whatever, all this is basically encompassed in. That's what makes it decentralized.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And proof of work is not based on like somebody says so.
Right.
Right? It's like you can tell that work was done. It's impossible to forge. It's not like some miner is saying like accept this block, or some entity is saying accept this block. Yep. And then there you go. That's it. And so as long as you have a bunch of miners, as long as the majority of miners are extending as long as the majority of miners are are behaving honestly, everything kind of works. And section 5 is the network. But the network is actually very simple. Everybody tries to connect to everybody else, and everybody broadcasts all new transactions and new blocks to everybody else. So
I think there's kind of an interesting, like, I feel like I'm still wrapping my head around like the privacy element of Bitcoin was also kind of the transparency element of Bitcoin, like what you're saying with like everybody broadcasting all the time, basically. And then like if your node drops off and you come back in, you're like, hey guys, what did I miss? And everyone's like, hey, here's what's going on, And so it's interesting that there's like the kind of dichotomy between like the increase in privacy and then also the increase in transparency.
Right. It's a different kind of privacy. So in the systems that we currently use, you interact with some trusted third party, let's say your bank, and nobody can see your transactions that you do at the bank, except for the bank, who also knows your real world identity.
Right. They know everything about you.
That's right. In Bitcoin, everybody can see all of the transactions that anybody does, but those transactions are not linked to any particular real world identity.
Right.
They just see the transactions. It doesn't have your name on it anywhere.
So if you wanted to make your public key known to everyone, for example, does that mean that then you could see like all the transactions that you do?
Yeah, I mean, to be like really technical, there's this, you actually use a different key for every transaction.
Oh, okay.
But all those keys are derived from the same key. It's called your extended public key. And yeah, if you told everybody, if you posted on your website, like, yeah, I'm Erin, this is my extended pub key, then anybody could see all of the transactions.
Well, let's say, okay, yeah, like I'm bringing this up because I guess now I'm sort of tangenting. We can pause this and go back. But like, let's say you wanted to have like a government that had its budget that was collected up and you wanted to know that your government was spending its money in a certain way, right? Like if you had a business, any sort of organization, right, you could have this public key that everybody knows and everyone can verify that the money is going exactly where it says it's going.
100%.
Like that is like
you could have exactly. You could have like a country publish its extended pub key and say all transactions we're going to do via keys that can be derived from this extended pub key.
Right.
And everything could be seen and audited. And if, for example, they were making a transaction with another entity that also had its extended pub key published, you could see, okay, the government of, El Salvador just sent the government of the Central African Republic like 10 Bitcoin.
Right.
And it would be completely transparent. Yeah. So it's like selective transparency when you want it.
Right.
But I will say that, like, although transactions are not linked to your real world identity, you can look at patterns of transactions as they're being made and say, okay, I think the person who did this transaction was also the person who did this other transaction.
Right. That's for just kind of studying the situation and kind of piecing together.
Yeah.
Doing some detecting.
I don't want to give people like the idea that like, oh, it's like, you can't get any information out of this.
Right.
And then, if you're unlucky, they can connect it to your real life identity. Like, let's say that you're on a Bitcoin exchange, you do a transaction with the exchange. Well, then of course the exchange knows that you did some transaction, and they can look at the Bitcoin transaction that they know you did and possibly link it to other Bitcoin transactions that you've done in the past, and then try to figure things out from there. So,
and this is how we know that like Satoshi hasn't been active, right? Like,
that's right. Yeah, we can see Satoshi was probably one of the major early miners. I don't think there's any way that we know for sure. I don't think it's been shown conclusively. Yeah, but it's highly likely that, obviously he launched it. There weren't a lot of miners. He was probably one of the major miners from the beginning.
Right.
So probably he controls a lot of these old coins, and we haven't seen those old coins move, which is why we think he hasn't been active.
Yeah, and love that. Like, a whole episode to Satoshi lore, honestly, at some point.
Totally.
But yeah, okay, maybe we should get back to the white paper here.
Yep.
So what, we're on network, just kind of...
Yeah, network's really simple. Like, once you have the blocks and the transactions and the digital signatures, the network has no hierarchy. Everybody just tries to connect to as many nodes as they can and tells all the nodes that they're connected to all new information that they learn, which is transactions and blocks, and receive information about transactions and blocks. And that allows them all to converge on the same longest chain. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and then incentives. So
incentives, we love talking about incentives over here.
Incentives are good. Yeah. So this is just talking about the incentive of these nodes that are doing this proof of work, that are burning energy to create blocks. Why would they do such a thing? Because it is expensive. And so the incentive is that every new block, the person who creates a new block has the special prerogative to create some new Bitcoin out of nothing and award it to themselves. That's the special prerogative of the miners.
And that's the analogy to being like a gold miner or
that's
whatever, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're doing this work, and the reason why is because you're mining Bitcoin. And
digging the Bitcoin out of the very earth.
Yeah.
So that's why they do this expensive work. And that's also why... So you're like, let's say there's like you currently have two chains, and one is 101 blocks long and one is 99 blocks long. So if you're a miner and you're trying to add a new block to the chain, and that new block that you're trying to create is going to give you Bitcoin, imagine that you started extending the 99 length chain, right? If you start to extend the 99 length chain and you find a new block, making it 100 long, there's still this 101 block chain out there. And so even if you create this 100th block on the 99 length chain, and you pay yourself some Bitcoin in that block, nobody's going to recognize that payment to yourself because the 101 length chain is still going to be the longest chain. So of course, as a rational actor, you're going to instead decide to extend the 101 length chain.
Right.
Because if you add a block to that, it'll be 102 blocks long. That will become the new longest chain. Everybody will recognize the payment to you in that 102nd block, and then the miners will then start extending the 102 length chain.
So it incentivizes like consensus and honesty. Essentially.
Exactly. Yeah, it incentivizes everybody to come to the same agreement on what is the longest chain.
Right. Okay.
Yep. And then chapter 7 is reclaiming disk space, which is super boring, but it just talks about how you don't necessarily need all of the historical transaction data.
So basically just like kind of practical computational things.
Practical computational things. Yeah. 8 is a great section, SPV, or not SPV, simplified payment verification. So this describes how you can run a a wallet that doesn't have to have all of the transactions. It can just get some block headers, which are these very tiny things, which are the things that point to the previous block, and the previous thing points to the block header. They don't have to have all the transactions, just some of the transactions that they care about, and they can still detect, when they've been paid, basically. Let's see. And then 9 is combining and splitting value, which this depends on the coin metaphor. And Erin doesn't.
I've heard it like 3 or 4 times, and every time I'm like, it's a Bitcoin.
Well, you're gonna hear it again. So in Bitcoin, you don't actually have a balance. You do not have a unitary balance that you control. I mean, do you have physical coins?
No.
I mean, I feel like we should have. I feel like we should have literal like cardboard money. Yeah. That little cardboard coins that we can push across the table.
We need you to do like a full in-depth demo at some point for my sake.
Yeah.
You can give.
No, it's gonna be for my sake because I enjoy explaining it.
Yeah.
So basically the thing is that, and you don't need to understand this, but when your wallet says that you have 10 Bitcoin, that doesn't actually mean that you have some balance that's just a single unitary number that goes up and down. That means that you control some number of what this paper calls coins, and coins have a value in Satoshis, which is the subunit of Bitcoin. One Satoshi is 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin.
And Satoshi didn't name them Satoshis, right? No. That's sort of an after the fact.
Yeah. Satoshi he was a very modest guy.
Yeah, it's just out of character.
Yeah, so Satoshi was very like professorial and like modest and like well spoken. He was very rarely rude. Very polite. Wouldn't name something after himself. But yeah, so 1/100 millionth of a Bitcoin is called a Satoshi. So you can think of these, and so when your wallet says that you have 10 Bitcoin, that means that you have some number of coins that together add up to 10 Bitcoin. Each coin can have a different value. So like you can have, if your wallet is saying you have 10 Bitcoin, maybe you have a coin worth 7, a coin worth 2, and a coin worth 1, because 7, 2, and 1 add up to 10. And when you make a transaction, what you do is you take some of those coins you control and you destroy them, and then you create new coins that pays the person that you want. So let's say, hypothetically, you want to pay me 4 Bitcoin. And you have these like coin worth 7, coin worth 2, coin worth 10. So you could do that transaction by taking your coin worth 7, destroying it in the transaction, paying me, creating a new coin that I control that has my public key on it, worth 4 Bitcoin, and then creating another coin worth 3, which is called the change, and that coin you would control. So you can't spend part of a coin. So in this case, you have to use the coin worth 7. So then you send me a new coin worth 4, and you send the 3 change back to yourself in the form of a new coin.
Why does that matter?
God, it has all these great properties. So Ethereum doesn't work this way. Ethereum works with a balance. It actually has a balance that goes up and down, and it creates all sorts of problems for the protocol.
Okay, so it's technical. Why it's beneficial to do it this way as opposed to just a balance.
That's right. Okay. So it means that everybody can, let's say you want to do 2 different transactions at the same time. Let's say you want to pay me 4 and you want to pay somebody else 1. Those transactions can happen completely independently because you have one transaction which takes your coin worth 4, your coin worth 7, gives me 4 and returns 3 to yourself. And then at the same time, you can do a second transaction which takes your coin worth 1, gives and just pays that directly to the other recipient of the second transaction, right? And so because those 2 transactions aren't touching the same balance, they can just be processed simultaneously, right? Because one involves your coin worth 4 and one involves your coin worth 1, and they can just go in parallel. They're not sort of related to each other.
I see. And then, we should set up a demo next episode.
Yeah, definitely.
We can have coins.
I love that. Like the toddler, coin money. Yeah. The other thing is that think about your transaction. Each coin actually has an identity. And so when you create a transaction that spends your coin worth 4 and you broadcast it to the network, now everybody knows that coin worth 4 is gone. And so that transaction, it's just like a digital message. Why can't everybody just send it again? Right. And the reason is because when that coin worth 4, when your 4 Bitcoin coin was spent, that transaction is now invalid because it's referring to a coin that doesn't exist. So it means that automatically old transactions are made invalid after they're performed.
I see.
Whereas in Ethereum, you actually have a number which you increment with each transaction. and the transactions can only go in the order. Like if you have to process transaction 10 and then transaction 11 and then transaction 12. And so it's a much more inflexible system because the transactions aren't really made automatically invalid. You have to do extra work to invalidate the transactions.
And I'm sure we'll have an entire episode on Bitcoin.
Yeah, we should have an entire episode also about Ethereum FUD, where I just talk about why Ethereum is bad and why like different aspects of its design are
You'd be
trash.
promoting the Ethereum FUD. You'd be doing Ethereum.
Yeah. We have the Bitcoin FUD episode where we dispel the FUD, and then we have the Ethereum FUD episode where we dispense the FUD.
Exactly. Yeah.
So this section 9 just describes about how your wallet manipulates these coins. That's it.
Okay.
And then we have privacy, which we kind of talked about. We kind of went over the fact, it shows the traditional privacy model where you have a bank who knows everything about you and sees all your transactions, but the public doesn't see your transactions. Right. And then we have this new privacy model where everybody sees all of the transactions, but in the normal case, those transactions aren't linked to your real world identity.
Right.
Yep.
11 calculations.
Yeah, calculations. So this is like showing okay, well, what would happen? What's the chance that an attacker who had some grift going, they want to create an alternative chain. Maybe they want to censor transactions, or maybe they want to undo old transactions. How much compute power would they need to outpace the honest chain? Right. And this says they need a lot.
Yeah. The probability, they talk about it in terms of probability, right? So the probability
and
it's improbable.
Yeah, it's improbable. Yeah, you need a lot of hash power. You need more than 50% of the total hash power, which is mining power.
And so far, however many years post Bitcoin invention, it seemed to held up, right?
100%. 100% of the time.
Beautiful.
I mean, actually, there were some minor disruptions to the network that were fixed immediately, but way better uptime than any other system.
Lovely.
And the other thing that I want to get into is this. This talks about how much hash power you need for a so-called 51% attack. It's called a 51% attack because in order to perform it, you need 51% of the mining power. But I just want to note that even if some nefarious entity, some ne'er-do-well, gets 51% or more of the mining power, they can't perform arbitrary attacks. For example, they can't steal your coins. They can't make transactions as you. They can't make people accept transactions that are not valid. Because the thing that we talked about all the way back in section 2, all this digital cryptography stuff, means that actually it's not the miners who decide which transactions are valid. Everybody can decide which transactions are valid. The miners just decide what order they go in. And so the miners are limited to, two fairly limited attacks. They can undo old transactions, and while they have the majority of the hash rate, they can mine new blocks that are empty. They can selectively or entirely prevent new transactions from
censoring transactions.
Transactions. Right. That's right. Yep.
But then again, the possibility of somebody getting 51%.
It's real hard.
It's
real hard. Yep.
Do you know what the top miners, how much they have? Is it 12% ish?
It's really hard to say because it's not just we could look and we could see okay, here's the pie chart of the different mining pools. I think that probably 20% maybe is the larger mining pools, but it's been a long time since I've looked. But the thing is that the mining pools aren't actually individual miners.
Right.
Miners, in order to make their reward smoother, they sort of join forces and mine with a pool, and they all split the rewards of the pool.
Sure. So it's still a group of individual miners,
essentially. And the key thing is that, okay, you see some pool that has 30% of the hash rate, and you're oh, wow, that's a lot of the hash rate. The thing is that pool is actually made up of many individual miners who are smaller, and there's very little cost to switching pools. If one pool starts to misbehave, miners can just immediately switch to another pool that's not misbehaving.
And from everything I've learned about miners is they don't like to coordinate efforts just for the sake of it. They enjoy being individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. They're very much rugged, I will die for Bitcoin types.
They're the like ideological libertarian.
Yeah, they're hardcore. Yeah. And you want those crazy Randian libertarians like at the oil head.
Yeah, to be the backbone of
Yeah. I'll drink your milkshake. You don't want the
politicians.
No. And
not someone like me. I'm just trying to
the artistic leftists we can make art, There's
a place for everyone.
That's right. Yeah. What was I saying? The miners,
the 51% attack, 51% attack, mining pools are made up of. I feel like we made the point.
I guess I was going to say that miners are usually very strongly incentivized. No, this is what I was going to say. I was going to say back in 2017, the miners started acting up. Yeah, they wanted the network to change. They wanted blocks to be much bigger, and blocks being bigger increases the resources required to have a full node. And so it means less people can run full nodes, less people can verify their own transactions. It reduces the trustlessness of the system.
Centralizing it more.
Centralizing it, meaning more people have to rely on some,
large mining facility, large computational power.
Yeah, large, like a node that they can't run to tell them what's going on with the Bitcoin network.
Right, okay.
And the miners got smacked down. We said, no, we're not going to do that. And there was a lot of money behind that effort.
Right.
And it failed. We crushed it.
Right.
Yeah. So
crushed it.
Yeah. And that also means that the miners that are kind of left are really more on board with the Bitcoin program.
Right.
Yeah. They're not just
trying to squeeze out whatever.
Exactly.
Yes,
yeah. Milking two tiny udders at the same time. I assume that's what that gesture means. And then we get to the conclusion. Yeah. We have proposed a system for electronic transactions without relying on trust. We started with the usual framework of coins made from digital signatures, which provides strong control of ownership, but is incomplete without a way to prevent double spending. To solve this, we proposed a peer-to-peer network using proof of work to record a public history of transactions that quickly becomes computationally impractical for an attacker to change. The network is robust in its unstructured simplicity. Nodes work all at once with little coordination. They do not need to be identified. Nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, and they vote with their CPU power. And then there's some references. The references are really fun because they sort of tell you where were we before Bitcoin?
Right.
Real quick, I'll say reference number 1 is to Wei Dai's B-Money. B-Money is the sort of system where everybody just makes these transactions, sign them, and broadcast them to each other. And then 2, we have how do you design a timestamping server? 3, more timestamping. 4, more timestamping. I don't know what 5 is. And then 6 is something called Hashcash, which was Bitcoin's proof of work, but in a context to prevent email spam. Where, you would take a message, you'd do a bunch of proof of work on it, so you could prove that you expended some energy on this email, and then you would send it. Let's say your mail server would get it and could say this took some amount of this message took some amount of energy to create, and so it's probably not spam.
I see. It's like when they make me fill out a CAPTCHA to like log into something.
That's right. Yeah, it's like a decentralized CAPTCHA system. Mm-hmm. And then 6 is how do you do public-private keys, and then 8 is how does probability work? I think it's funny that one's from 1957 because it's the cute. Basic math thing.
Yeah,
you know. Yeah.
And that's it.
That's it.
That's the whole white paper.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Casey. That was such a clear explanation.
I hope so. No,
I think it was.
Even though I made you listen to the coins thing again. The coins analogy is going to come up over and over again. I was thinking when you were saying I'm so bored of the coins analogy, I was okay, well maybe I should drop it. And then I was no.
You were no.
I love the coins.
Yeah, we can have a set next time. You can move some physical coins around.
Yep.
At some point it'll drill into my brain, I think. But yeah, that's the only part. But I think the rest of it I followed.
Cool, awesome. Yeah.
It was great.
And it's a simple system. I mean, I think that the white paper is a bit intimidating, but all the key components to how Bitcoin work are here. And so, it's something that you can read. Maybe you understood some of what we said, not all of it, but it's stuff you can fill out all those gaps in your knowledge as you go forward.
Right. It's the basis. And I think it also it shows Bitcoin's not a company, it's not a government, it's not a group of people.
Right.
It is this. at the heart of it.
Yep, it's that. Yep.
And it's anyone can look at it and see what's going on.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've covered everything.
Yeah.
Episode 1.
Episode 1.
Starting at the beginning, Bitcoin white paper,
In the books.
PDF that changed
changed
everything.
everything. Yeah.
I don't know. We've got lots of other kind of episode topics potentially.
Yep.
But we'd love to hear from anyone who watched this the
our
whole way
audience.
through.
Yeah. What do you want to hear? Any questions that you have? I love answering questions.
As you can tell.
Yeah. Also, like basic questions, like what is a private key? Is the kind of question that I would love to answer,
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be complicated. Don't feel nervous. If you have a question, everybody else either has that question or has had that question in the past, right? I think it's really easy to get intimidated. I all the time, I have basic questions about like, oh, how does this little detail of Bitcoin work that I don't know? So I think it's just good to, don't be scared.
Yeah, he'll nerd out about the technical specifics. I like the philosophical and political implications. Any sort of musings about like the way that Bitcoin would fit into like the system or change
or
the system,
if you're in a relationship and like you're really into Bitcoin and your partner isn't, or your partner is really into Bitcoin and you aren't, and they've forced you to watch this podcast, maybe some relationship advice.
Yeah,
you can dispense.
Really anything.
Yeah,
we'll go whatever. We'll do whatever.
Yeah,
so yeah. I mean, we'll post this on YouTube. We'll also post it on just wherever podcasting things.
Yep.
Write a review.
Wherever fine podcasts are sold.
Exactly.
As they say.
Yeah. Just reach out to us and we'll answer. We got nobody else talking to us at this point.
Our schedules are open. We don't have lives. Come on.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in.
See you guys next time.
Bye.